It covers approximately 1,000 hectares and is within the Magilligan area of special scientific interest, which is an ASSI basically. The Lough borders the southern extent of the estate, and the western boundary is defined by the Foyle approaches and the Irish Sea. And although the Magilligan site is a dedicated British military training estate, it is also the location for HMP Magilligan. And the area of excavation that we sort of worked in is located just to the northwest of the prison within an area of open grassland, which lies just south of Range 2. So the map, the landscape map of Ireland there, the red dot at the top is our lovely area, Magilligan. And then if you can see, we zone into it a bit closer. And then the red stripes are highlighting the area of the ASSI area, and the yellow dot shows you roughly where we were excavating. So a little bit of background as to sort of identification of the trenches and things. Aspects of the training estate were examined by myself during my PhD and the CCA team at Queen's in tandem with excavations, archaeological excavations that we were undertaking at Ballykinler, starting in and around 2015, culminating in 2017. We were identifying well-preserved fieldworks, which were characteristic of the First World War practice trenches also at Magilligan. So sections of trenches that we were seeing at Magilligan were very comparable to those that were investigated at Ballykinler, and also widespread across the estate, the full landscape in actual fact. And using aerial photography and the LiDAR data, it was considered highly likely that a lot of these sort of features and their subsurface features would still survive in situ. A recently commissioned Minister of Defence audit was undertaken by Defence Infrastructure, and they identified certain areas of these trench systems to be of elevated heritage value, and in particular a number of the crenellated type trenches sited in the area of flat grassland just north of the prison. The report then recommended that these were further investigated in order to establish the full extent and the character of the remains. And so really that gave us our location for the excavation. And this slide shows you to the top left there what we worked with in Ballykinler, and in comparison to what we sort of dealt with in Magilligan. There are huge similarities, albeit that it's not as structured looking, but we had sort of some background to work upon. So we did. So that was the LiDAR analysis I'm taken in 2015. The Magilligan townland itself is rich in military heritage, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this, with a number of the sites and monuments that are already recorded on the Department for Communities Defence Heritage database. And during the 16th and 17th centuries, military activity was centred on the sanctuary of the Foyle and its narrows, with the first rifle range established at Magilligan in 1898. This was later augmented by 2 additional 100-yard ranges in 1912, with further expansions that have been seen since 1914, and of course that's up in sort of the succeeding decades up into the present day. However, the earliest known cartographic reference really sort of for the use of Magilligan for the purpose of military training doesn't appear until we reach the 3rd edition Ordnance Survey map, which is sort of 1900-1907. And that details the 100-yard rifle range and some permanent buildings that were sort of dispersed across the landscape at the time, used for the actual encampment itself. And during this period, encampments were basically little more than a tented accommodation used for the soldiers that were sort of encamped away from their home garrison. However, as I mentioned there were some permanent facilities, and those included toilets, stores, cookhouses and canteens. Fairly typical for the period and very similar in comparison to what we found at Ballykinler as well. By the later 19th century, Ireland had many local volunteer corps regularly drilling at locations such as Magilligan. And as the need for the British troops intensified following the outbreak of the Second Boer War, the expansion of these camping grounds and range areas became essential. And this period saw the conversion of the Magilligan camp into a year-round training facility, effectively a summer camp, a sort of a summer camp that was developed and then became all year round, and a facility that was used widely. So during the Second Boer War, the militia battalions were mobilised across Ireland with reservists and newly formed territorial forces, such as the Yeomanry Corps, tasked with compulsory summer training each year. One such territorial force was the 6th Enniskilling Dragoons. They were initially formed at Magilligan in 1908 and later became a service squadron and divisional cyclist corps, and were attached later to the 36th Ulster Division. They were then later absorbed into the 9th Battalion of the Royal Irish Fusiliers. The squadron itself comprised mostly farmers' sons from the likes of Fermanagh, Tyrone, Monaghan and South Donegal. We know also that the North Irish Horse also trained at Magilligan, and in fact actually held their summer camp at Magilligan in 1910. So historically, we know the trench digging was likely to have been taking place at Magilligan during or near to the latter period of the Second Boer War, perhaps as early as 1900. But the year 1909 saw the production of the Field Service Regulation Handbook, within which it was noted that trenching was becoming an essential component of the defensive tactics for the period, and therefore proving necessary for all recruits to become familiar with the practice of spade work and entrenching. Subsequently, the art of entrenching itself developed extensively, and not least during the period of 1914-18, as the nature of trench warfare continually evolved. Basically, training in field practice was included in the art of creating, training in field practices was included in the art of creating hasty entrenchments and the use of such entrenchments in the field, and the various principles that governed their form, their construction and their siting and drainage. And these were important factors that we would then later, something that we would later realise the importance of during our actual excavations. The images that you see on this slide here at the moment is just, again, that overview of the training estate with the identified areas of entrenchment, and sort of a view of what we have here is Beaumont Hamel in 1916 and the reality of the trench warfare. So we've got practice and we've got reality. Quite striking really when you look at it.